courtroom fell into a stillness so complete it felt like the walls themselves were listening. Cameras hovered in the back like silent witnesses, waiting for the moment everyone knew was coming. At the defendant's table sat the police chief's son, leaning back with the careless smirk of someone raised to believe consequences were optional. Meanwhile, across the room, the veteran he had assaulted stood with a stiffness that wasn't just physical pain. It was the weight of being humiliated by someone who had never sacrificed a single day for anyone but himself. Judge Caprio studied them both, his hands folded, his expression carved with a mix of stern disappointment and something almost paternal, as if he were staring at two different versions of America. The courtroom air tightened when he finally leaned forward. Reporters adjusted their lenses. The veteran swallowed hard. Even the smirking son straightened, suddenly unsure. And then Judge Caprio spoke slow, deliberate, every syllable landing like a verdict long before the official one. It was a single sentence that would ignite headlines, fuel debate shows, and send shockwaves beyond Providence. But no one in that courtroom, not even the police chief's son, was prepared for what Judge Caprio said next. The shock that rippled through the courtroom didn't stay contained within those walls. News of the assault had already spread across the city. A veteran attacked in broad daylight by the police chief's son. A young man long rumored to hide behind his father's badge. For many in the community, it wasn't just another incident. It was the moment their quiet frustration finally found a face. People who respected service members felt a deep anger simmering beneath the surface. Yet they whispered their outrage in private, afraid of the political reach the chief had accumulated over the years. Everyone knew speaking out carried risks. Still, the images of the bruised veteran sparked something. A grainy cell phone clip captured the aftermath, and within hours, local forums flooded with disbelief. How does this keep happening? Why are the powerful always protected? The questions echoed until someone posted a simple phrase, #Justice for the veteran. It grew slowly at first, carried by neighbors and local business owners, then accelerated as veterans groups shared the story. Soon the hashtag was pushing its way through feeds across the region, a digital chorus demanding fairness in a world that often bent toward privilege. Meanwhile, the city's political class tried to stay silent. Journalists sensed hesitation. Community leaders tiptoed around the facts. People wondered if this case would be quietly buried like the others involving the same family. The real tension wasn't just about the assault, but what it represented: the fear that equality before the law was becoming a fading American promise. That's when attention turned toward one man, Judge Frank Caprio. His reputation for compassion and principle had given countless ordinary people hope. And now the public wondered whether he would be allowed to act freely. Comment sections lit up with speculation. Will he really challenge the chief's influence? Can he hold the son accountable? Is this where the system finally draws a line? The questions created a sense of anxious anticipation, as though the entire city were waiting for a verdict on more than just one case. They were waiting for proof that justice still meant something. What they found hinted at a pattern far more disturbing than anyone had assumed, a trail of ignored complaints and quiet warnings that suddenly demanded to be taken seriously. And just when the conversation reached a fever pitch, investigators uncovered details from the attacker's past that blew the story wide open. From the outside, the police chief's son looked like the kind of young man who had been handed every possible advantage before he even learned to walk. He grew up in a neighborhood where doors opened automatically, where his last name cleared paths that others had to fight for. Teachers remembered him as the student who disrupted class, yet never faced real punishment. Bar owners whispered about his temper, but never filed official reports. And every time a complaint surfaced, an altercation at a party, a shove in a parking lot, a threat thrown at someone smaller, his father's connections swept in like a cleanup crew, scrubbing away the evidence until nothing remained but rumors and resentment. His friends joked that he lived life on easy mode, and in many ways he did. He walked through the world with the carelessness of someone who had never experienced consequences, someone who believed that accountability was a concept meant for other people. Yet when the cameras were on, he played a different role, the performative patriot who saluted at parades, posted supportive messages on Veterans Day, and insisted he respected the troops. He said all the right phrases, the kind that sounded good over microphones and looked even better on social media. But those who knew him behind the scenes saw the truth, the smirks, the mockery, the casual disrespect he directed toward the very people he claimed to honor. To him, veterans were props for public image, nothing more. This hypocrisy wasn't loud or cartoonish. It was subtle, woven into his habits and choices. He didn't consider himself cruel. He considered himself untouchable. Whenever someone questioned his behavior, he brushed it off with a laugh, confident that his family name would shield him like it always had. His father reinforced that belief with every intervention, treating each incident as a minor inconvenience rather than a warning sign. Together, they built a bubble of entitlement around him, and he learned to wear it like armor. So when the assault happened, when he confronted the veteran with drunken bravado and a simmering need to prove his dominance, he didn't hesitate. He truly believed there would be no fallout. The moment the cuffs clicked around his wrists, he still smirked, cracking jokes with the arresting officers. To him, it was all temporary, a brief interruption before the inevitable dismissal. He expected another closed-door conversation, another erased report, another boys will be boys excuse from those who owed his father favors. The dramatic irony was almost painful. While the public erupted in outrage, he brushed it off as noise. While community members organized, he scrolled through his phone, confident it would all blow over. Even as the case crossed Judge Caprio's desk, he shrugged, convinced that the courtroom was just another stage where his privilege would carry the day. In his mind, this was nothing more than an inconvenience, another slap on the wrist. Another reminder that he lived above the rules, but this time, something was different. The man he assaulted wasn't a nameless stranger. He wasn't someone who would quietly fade back into the shadows. He was someone whose story carried weight, history, and heartbreaks, someone whose life demanded to be seen and heard. And once the truth of that story emerged, everything the police chief's son thought he understood about power, protection, and impunity began to crumble. Because the man he assaulted wasn't just anyone, and his story changed everything. He had once moved through life with the quiet certainty of someone who believed service had purpose. 3 tours overseas had shaped him long nights under foreign skies, the weight of gear on aching shoulders, and the unspoken pact among soldiers who learned to rely on one another when everything else fell apart. But the day he returned home, the world felt different. The country he had defended with unwavering loyalty moved at a speed he no longer recognized, and he often felt like he was chasing a version of himself he had left on the battlefield. His body carried the reminders, a limp that worsened in cold weather, a nerve injury that made his hands tremble. In the heavy fog of memories he tried to keep buried, he found work at a small auto garage on the edge of town, the kind of place with faded posters, mismatched tools, and a radio that never seemed to tune quite right. It paid little, but it offered routine, and routine was something he could hold on to. He showed up early, stayed late, and never complained. The local customers appreciated him because he never tried to upsell, never spoke more than necessary, and always treated people with a softness that felt almost out of place in such a hardened world. Despite everything he had endured, he never asked for special treatment. Even when his injuries flared or when he couldn't quite hide the exhaustion, pride kept him steady and humility kept him grounded. What people rarely saw were the small acts of bravery. He continued to perform long after the uniform came off. He stepped in when he saw a young boy being cornered by older kids behind a convenience store. He intervened when a woman was being harassed outside a bar, placing himself between her and the man who wouldn't leave her alone. He helped neighbors carry groceries, shoveled snow for elderly residents, and donated what little he could to charity drives he stumbled across. He didn't do these things for recognition. He did them because they were the last surviving pieces of the man he used to be. The pieces he refused to let the world take from him. So when the assault happened, when the police chief's son shoved him, mocked him, and struck him with the arrogant confidence of someone who thought decency was optional, he didn't report it. He simply went home, cleaned himself up, and told no one. When a coworker noticed the bruise on his jaw, he brushed it off as a slip in the garage. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want attention. Deep down, he felt invisible, forgotten, smaller than he had ever felt in combat. It wasn't just the pain of the assault. It was the pain of realizing how quickly society dismissed the worth of someone who had once risked everything for it. That feeling cut deeper than any physical blow. But the story didn't end there. A bystander had filmed part of the confrontation. When the video surfaced, the truth spread faster than his silence could contain it. Someone recognized him. A veterans group reached out. For the first time in years, he felt seen not as a burden, but as someone whose dignity mattered. When the case arrived in Judge Caprio's courtroom, the veteran entered quietly, unsure of what to expect. He spoke with hesitation, voice trembling, describing not just the incident but the years of trying to rebuild a life that often felt like it was slipping through his fingers. His words were simple, but the honesty behind them struck the room with a power loud enough to silence even the most cynical observers. And when Judge Caprio heard the veteran's testimony, he paused for a full 15 seconds. The courtroom held its breath. The police chief's son entered the courtroom with the swagger of someone who believed the building itself bowed to his family name. He strolled to the defendant's table, chewing gum, hands casually in his pockets, as if this were a minor inconvenience rather than a hearing that had drawn the eyes of an entire city. The contrast between him and the veteran was almost painful. The veteran stood beside his small wooden podium with shoulders tight and hands trembling, the weight of the moment pressing against every old wound he carried. His voice was barely above a whisper when he introduced himself, as though he worried even the sound of speaking too loudly might invite trouble. Judge Caprio watched them both intently. His expression was composed, but there was a subtle shift in his posture, quiet seriousness that everyone in the room felt. He began with gentle questions for the veteran, giving him the space to speak without pressure, and the courtroom leaned in to hear his soft responses. Then Caprio turned to the offender. His tone didn't rise, but the questions grew sharper, more direct, each one closing the distance between truth and the excuse-filled path the young man kept. Trying to escape down, the police chief's son attempted to deflect blame almost immediately. He blamed the lighting, the angle of the video, veteran's supposed aggression, and even the bystanders who recorded the incident. Every excuse sounded thinner than the last. His lawyer jumped in repeatedly, objecting before the judge had even finished asking a question, trying to create noise where clarity was forming. Each interruption carried a whiff of desperation, and each time Judge Caprio responded with the same steady firmness. The room seemed to still a little more. The tension tightened when the offender shifted tactics. He turned toward the veteran with a smirk that looked rehearsed, attempting to recast himself as the victim. He implied the veteran misunderstood him, suggested the situation wasn't that serious, and insinuated that the man's injuries were exaggerated. The veteran flinched at the insinuation, not out of fear, but out of the familiar sting of being disbelieved. A murmur spread across the back rows. Even through the courtroom's restrictions, the public watching the live stream erupted. Comments flooded social media. Why is he acting so smug? He thinks he's untouchable. His father's power won't save him today. Caprio's patience thinned in a way only those familiar with him could detect. He didn't raise his voice. He simply narrowed his eyes, leaned forward slightly, and let a quiet, intense silence settle over the room. It was the kind of silence that made people reconsider their choices. When he resumed speaking, every word landed with greater weight. He asked the police chief's son to clarify earlier statements. And with each attempt, the young man stumbled deeper into contradictions. His arrogance began to crack. The gum he had been chewing so boldly now seemed out of place, and he swallowed hard, unsure for the first time. Still, his confidence hadn't fully drained. Years of protection had conditioned him to believe he could charm or talk his way out of any situation. So when the judge pressed him on why he approached the veteran in the first place, the young man leaned back, shrugged, and delivered a careless answer meant to reclaim control. To show he didn't take any of this seriously, he thought it made him look confident. He thought it would soften the moment, prove this was all being blown out of proportion. But instead, the words he chose became the turning point, the one fatal mistake that sealed his fate. The courtroom was already tense, but no one expected the spark that finally ignited it. The police chief's son leaned back in his chair like he owned. The wood it was carved from kept smirking through the testimony. Every time the veteran spoke, the son rolled his eyes, whispered something to his lawyer, or shook his head with exaggerated boredom. But then came the moment that changed everything. While the veteran quietly described the assault, voice trembling, the young man suddenly scoffed loud enough for the microphones to catch it. And then he muttered it carelessly, cruelly, and with absolute arrogance. He's just a veteran. Who cares? There was a sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a groan, just a collective tightening of the room. Even his lawyer froze. The veteran looked down at his boots as if the words somehow confirmed everything he feared about being unseen, unheard, unwanted. But Judge Caprio didn't look away. Slowly he removed his glasses. A deliberate motion, almost ceremonial. He placed them on the bench in front of him, folded his hands, and stared straight at the young man. The courtroom became so silent that you could hear the quiet hum of the ceiling lights. Then, a voice that carried more weight than volume, Caprio spoke. "Son, do you have any idea what you just said?" The offender shrugged. "I mean, yeah, he's not special," Caprio exhaled, but it wasn't frustration. It was disappointment so deep, it made the air itself heavier. "Not special," he repeated softly. "A man who put on a uniform so you wouldn't have to. A man who stood in sandstorms, slept in dirt, risked his life so you could sleep in a warm bed. A man who came home with injuries you will never understand. And you say he's not special?" The smirk faded. Caprio continued, his voice calm but razor sharp. "Gosh. You come into this courtroom acting like the world owes you something because of your last name. But let me tell you something that your father should have told you a long time ago. This bench," he tapped the wooden platform, "doesn't bow to power, and justice does not recognize privilege." The police chief's son shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unsure what to do with his hands. His confidence leaked away like air from a punctured tire. Caprio wasn't finished. "You claim you didn't mean it, but I've seen the footage." He lifted a folder. "You didn't just bump into this man. You followed him. You confronted him. You shoved him. Witnesses say you laughed when he fell." The young man's lawyer tried to object, but Caprio held up a hand. "No, not this time. You've had years of people speaking for you. This courtroom will hear the truth." He flipped open the folder. "This isn't your first assault. Not your first fight. Not your first time hiding behind your father's badge. Complaints that vanished. Reports that mysteriously went missing. Incidents explained away as youthful mistakes." The young man swallowed hard. Caprio leaned forward. "You want to know what real courage looks like? It's not swagger. It's not money. It's not your father's title. It's a man who has seen war, who has buried friends, who still gets up every morning and works to survive. That is courage. That is honor. And you," he paused, "you have mocked it." Room was so still that even the cameras seemed to stop breathing. Then Caprio delivered the line that would be replayed across the internet millions of times. "Let me make something perfectly clear. In this courtroom, every veteran matters. And as long as I sit on this bench, no one, no matter their name, gets to harm one of them and walk away." A low murmur rippled through the back row. Even officers in uniform, many of them veterans themselves, nodded subtly. The police chief's son's face turned pale. He looked at his father sitting in the audience, but the chief's expression revealed nothing. Caprio wasn't done reshaping the moment. He lifted another document. "This medical report shows the veteran suffered a fractured rib, a concussion, and lasting nerve pain. That isn't an accident. That is an assault. A deliberate, targeted assault." The young man stuttered. I didn't mean." Caprio cut him off gently. "You didn't think there would be consequences. That's the truth, isn't it?" The young man's silence was an admission louder than any confession. Caprio straightened his back, quiet authority filling the room. "I hope you're listening. Because this moment is the first real consequence of your life. And I want you to remember something." He looked directly into the young man's eyes. You hurt a man who protected you without ever knowing your name. A woman in the back wiped a tear. Someone else whispered, "Wow." Online, the live comments exploded. "He messed with the wrong judge," says Caprio in full legend mode. "That line needs to be framed." And then Caprio delivered the true mic drop. In 20 years, no clip has gone viral for the wrong reasons faster than your sentence today. He's just a veteran. But what happens next? This is going to be replayed even more. He picked up his gavel, but didn't strike it yet. Because what he did next became the most replayed courtroom clip of the entire year. Cliffhanger transition, and with one final decision. Judge Caprio changed the entire trajectory of the case in the young man's life. By the time the courtroom emptied, the story had already exploded far beyond its walls. Social media feeds were aflame with clips of Judge Caprio's unflinching words. Each frame replayed, slowed down, and shared with captions that spread like wildfire. Hashtag Caprio for President began trending within hours, alongside hashtag Justice for Veterans. As citizens of every age, profession, and background weighed in. Memes juxtaposing the young man's arrogance with Caprio's calm authority went viral. TikTok creators stitched reactions, slow-motion replays, and emotional narrations that drew millions of views. Every platform became a forum not just for discussion but for validation, a collective affirmation that dignity, sacrifice, and courage still commanded respect in America. In the communities near and far, veterans gathered at the courthouse to stand silently, saluting and nodding. Their presence both a show of solidarity and a testament to the long-overlooked sacrifices of ordinary Americans. Even some officers under the police chief, who had long watched the young man's behavior with frustration, spoke anonymously to reporters, sharing whispers of relief that someone had finally held the entitled accountable. Political commentators scrambled to contextualize the event. Local leaders issued statements praising the courage of both the veteran and the judge. While national figures weighed in on how power and privilege were being challenged, talk shows and podcasts dissected every line of Caprio's speech. Pundits debated whether this moment represented a fleeting victory or the start of a deeper cultural reckoning. Could a courtroom decision inspire a new era of accountability? Could ordinary citizens finally feel their voices mattered against entrenched authority? Every news cycle carried echoes of the same sentiment. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a statement about identity, respect, and the values that bind a nation. The public discussion wasn't confined to veterans or lawyers. Everyday Americans shared stories of their own struggles with injustice, relating to the veterans' quiet dignity. The courtroom footage became a symbolic touchstone. The moment when a single man's voice amplified the truth of countless unheard stories. Social media continued to churn with reactions. Threads grew into movements, and hashtags transformed into rallying cries. The city, and soon the country, watched as justice unfolded in a way that felt both overdue and profoundly human. Yet even as the online storm raged, and the veteran felt the first hints of recognition and validation, there was an undercurrent of suspense. Something more was coming. People sensed it in the courtroom hush, in Caprio's measured gaze, in the way even seasoned reporters leaned in for the next word. This moment, powerful as it was, had not yet reached its emotional crescendo. But Caprio wasn't done yet. He had one more message, one final truth that stunned even the veteran. Judge. Caprio looked across the courtroom one final time, eyes resting briefly on the young man whose arrogance had nearly overshadowed the law itself. Then he turned fully toward the veteran, his voice steady, warm, and unwavering. "Justice," he said, "is not a privilege reserved for those with a name, a title, or power. Justice exists to protect dignity, to uphold the value of every person who contributes to this country, quietly or loudly, with sacrifice or service. And today, that principle has been affirmed." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. The veteran's shoulders shifted, his chest rising and falling more evenly, as if the acknowledgement itself lifted a burden he hadn't realized he'd carried. Caprio continued, his tone now carrying a personal resonance. "You are not invisible. This country sees you. I see you. Every veteran who has ever stood in harm's way, Every citizen who has quietly endured injustice. Every ordinary person striving to uphold what is right or worth is never overlooked while I sit on this bench. Turning back to the young man, Caprio addressed the lesson with clarity and precision. Power misused corrodes trust. Authority without accountability is a danger to every corner of our society. But when ordinary people are protected, when dignity is defended, regardless of status, that is how a nation truly strengthens itself. This is not merely a courtroom ruling. It is a reaffirmation of the ideals we claim as Americans. Courage, honor, respect, these are not optional. They are the backbone of a society that survives and thrives. As he spoke, the courtroom seemed to breathe as one. Tears welled in the veteran's eyes, a mixture of relief, validation, and the long-suppressed emotion of years of struggle. Other witnesses, journalists, and even officers in attendance felt a quiet tremor of recognition. The moral clarity of the moment was unmistakable. Online, viewers echoed the sentiment in real time, commenting, sharing, and expressing solidarity with both the veteran and the principles that had been publicly defended. Hashtags from earlier now carried deeper resonance, as hashtag Justice for Veterans became not just a slogan, but a declaration of national conscience. Caprio was concluded with a voice that blended authority and empathy, creating a crescendo that left no room for doubt. This is how we honor those who serve, how we protect those who are vulnerable, and how we remind everyone that the law exists not to shelter the powerful, but to safeguard the principle that every human being matters. Carry that with you, not just today, but every day. Stand for dignity, defend justice, and lift those who have been overlooked. That is what America is at its best. The veteran, tears now freely falling, nodded. The weight of years of invisibility finally lifted. The courtroom, the city, and the online world felt the impact. The message had landed fully. The moral resonance could be felt by anyone who would witness the moment. And that leads us to one final message for viewers everywhere. Today's story reminds us that justice is not a privilege, it is a right. When the entitled try to overshadow courage, and when power is misused, it is the voice of ordinary people, the dignity of those who serve, and the steadfastness of those who refuse to remain silent that restores balance. Judge Caprio's courtroom became more than a stage for accountability. It became a symbol that no one stands above the law, that every act of courage matters. If this story moved you, take action in your own way. Support the veterans and service members who protect our freedoms. Challenge entitlement wherever you see it. Share this video to spread awareness, so the lesson of dignity, courage, and accountability reaches as many people as possible. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that expose truth, uplift values, and shine a light on the everyday heroes who keep our communities strong. Your engagement is not passive, it matters. Your voice holds power. Remember, it's not just a courtroom. It's a reminder that standing for what is right can change lives, inspire a nation, and restore faith in what it means to be truly American. Never underestimate the impact one story, one action, one voice can have.